The international terminal hummed with life, rolling suitcases, boarding announcements, the bitter scent of coffee. Alexander Cain sat alone near Gate 34, his charcoal suit immaculate, his phone screen glowing with stock reports he barely registered. At 32, he had mastered the art of invisibility despite his wealth. No security detail, no entourage. Just him and the weight of a billion-dollar empire pressing on his shoulders. A woman's voice cut through his thoughts. "Pretend to hug me, please." Alexander looked up. The woman beside him trembled, her faded jeans and worn sweater speaking of struggles he'd never known. Her eyes held desperation and something fiercer underneath. Defiance, maybe. Across the aisle, a man in an expensive suit sneered at her, a brunette clinging to his arm like a trophy. "Still the same little nobody, huh?" the man said, loud enough for others to hear. The woman's face flushed crimson. Alexander saw her hands shake. He'd spent years avoiding involvement, keeping people at arm's length.
Ow.
Relationships were liabilities. Emotions were weaknesses to be eliminated from quarterly reports. But something in her whispered plea broke through the walls he'd built. Alexander slipped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. She fit against him like she'd always belonged there, her heart hammering so hard he felt it through his shirt. Cedar and leather from his jacket mixed with her shampoo, something floral and inexpensive. The sneering man's face went slack. Her boyfriend Alexander said, his voice carrying authority he'd earned through hostile takeovers and boardroom battles. The woman stiffened in his arms. He felt her panic, her shock, her desperate hope that this stranger wouldn't abandon her to her humiliation. The man with the trophy girlfriend sputtered, trying to recover. "Well, congratulations. You managed to trade up after all." Alexander met his eyes with glacial calm. "Maybe she didn't think you deserved to know." The man and his companion disappeared into the crowd, but not before shooting one final poisonous glare. Alexander released her slowly. She looked down at her hands, her voice barely audible. "Thank you. You looked like you needed saving," he said. She glanced up at him, really seeing him for the first time. Her eyes were hazel, flecked with gold. "I'm Elena Alexander." The boarding call echoed through the terminal. They were on the same flight. As they walked toward the gate, Alexander made a decision that would shatter both their worlds. When the flight attendant scanned his first-class ticket, he placed his hand on Elena's back and guided her through. The attendant smiled, assuming they were together. Alexander didn't correct her. Elena's ex passed them, heading toward business class. Elena's face darkened when he saw where she was sitting. Alexander leaned back in the plush leather seat, opening a magazine. He felt Elena's confusion, her fear, her strange exhilaration. "You don't have to drink it," he said, setting champagne on her tray. "But you should stop acting like you don't belong." An hour into the flight, the ex appeared beside their row.
Ow.
"So, Alexander Cain," he said casually, "I thought I recognized you." Elena's head snapped toward Alexander, her eyes wide with questions. Alexander closed his magazine. Perhaps she has better things to talk about than money. After the man slithered away, Elena turned to him. "Who are you really?" Alexander looked at her for a long moment. The truth would terrify her. The truth would make her see him as everyone else did. A checkbook, a ladder, a means to an end. Someone who prefers not to be defined by headlines. But as the plane descended, and Elena's eyes reflected the city, lights below, Alexander realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. He'd felt something when she asked him to hold her, and feeling anything was the one thing he couldn't afford. The hotel lobby gleamed with marble and gold.
Alexander had insisted on getting Elena a room when her connecting flight was canceled.
She'd protested until he'd simply walked to the desk and handled it. With 3 sentences and a credit card that made the concierge's eyes widen, now they sat in the hotel bar, the air thick with tension neither would name. He didn't have to do. "This," Elena said, gripping her water glass like a lifeline. "I know." Alexander swirled his whiskey, watching amber liquid catch the low light. "I wanted to, why?" The question hung between them. Alexander had asked himself the same thing 17 times since the airport. He'd built an empire by eliminating variables, calculating risks, never acting on impulse. Yet here he was. "'Cause you reminded me of someone," he finally said. "Who? Myself." Before I learned that vulnerability is just another word for target, Lena studied him, and Alexander felt exposed in a way no boardroom had ever managed. "Happened to you?" Before he could answer, his phone lit up. A name flashed across the screen. Victoria. His jaw tightened. "I need to take this." He walked outside into the cold night air. "What do you want? Is that any way to greet your fiancé?" Victoria's voice dripped honey and venom in equal measure. "Ex-fiancé, we ended this 2 years ago." "Did we?" "Because our father seemed to think the merger still stands." "And you know what happens if you back out now?" Alexander's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles went white. "The company isn't for sale." "Neither am I, darling. Yet here we are, both commodities in a game we didn't start." She paused, saw the photos from the airport. "Who's the charity case? None of your concern?" "Everything about you is my concern. The wedding is in 6 weeks, Alexander. Stop playing savior and remember what's at stake." The line went dead. Alexander stood in the cold, his breath misting in front of him. 6 weeks until he surrendered his freedom to save his grandfather's legacy. 6 weeks until Victoria's family's investment firm merged with his, creating an empire that would crush anything in its path. 6 weeks until he became exactly what he'd spent his life trying to avoid, his father. When he returned to the bar, Elena was gone. Panic seized him, unfamiliar and unwelcome. He found her outside, leaning against the building, arms wrapped around herself. "I Googled you," she said without looking at him. "Alexander Cain, billionaire, owner of half the airlines in the country, and apparently engaged to Victoria Ashford, heiress philanthropist, perfect in every photograph. That's not real." "Part the billions or the fiancé? Fiancé isn't what you think?" Elena finally met his eyes. "Then tell me what she is." Alexander's carefully constructed defenses cracked. "A prison sentence I agreed to. My family's company was failing. Her family offered to save it in exchange for marriage. A merger of dynasties, they called it. I called it selling my soul, but I signed the papers anyway." "Why?" "Because my grandfather built that company from nothing. Because 2,000 people depend on it for their livelihoods. Because I'm good at sacrificing pieces of myself if the equation balances." He stepped closer. "But then you asked a stranger to hold you, and for the first time in years, the equation didn't matter." Elena's breath hitched. "You should have told me. Would you have let me help you if you knew?" Silence answered him. "That's what I thought." Alexander turned to leave, but Elena grabbed his wrist. "I spent 3 years with Jason," she said, her voice raw. 3 years being told I wasn't enough, that my dreams were too small, that I was lucky he stayed. When? He left me for someone whose last name opened doors. I believed him. I believed I was nobody. You're not? How do you know? You don't even know me. I know you asked for help when you needed it. I know you didn't crumble when he tried to destroy you. I know you're terrified right now, but you're still standing here." Alexander's voice dropped. "And I know that in the last 4 hours I've felt more alive than I have in a decade." Lena stepped back, her eyes glistening. Don't make me believe in something that can't exist. Why can't it?" "Because you're engaged. Because you're Alexander Cain, and I'm a nobody with a second-hand sweater. Because fairy tales don't happen to girls like me." Alexander closed the distance between them. "I'm going to break the engagement. You can't. You said people depend on your company. Then I'll find another way." But I'm not marrying her, Elena. Not now." "Why?" "Because for the first time in my life, I want something I can't buy." Elena's resolve shattered. She kissed him, desperate and fierce, and Alexander kissed her back like a man drowning who'd just found air. When they broke apart, she whispered, 6 weeks isn't enough time. Then we'll make it enough." Neither of them saw the photographer across the street, camera clicking in the darkness. By morning, their kiss would be on every gossip site in the country, and Victoria would declare war. The photos hit the internet at dawn. By noon, Elena's face was everywhere. Alexander stood in his penthouse office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, his phone exploding with calls he refused to answer. His lawyers wanted statements. His board wanted explanations. His grandfather wanted him home immediately. Only one call mattered. Elena's voice shook when she answered. There are reporters outside my apartment. Pack a bag. I'm sending a car. Alexander, I can't just leave my life. Your life just became a war zone. Let me protect you. 30 minutes later, she was in his penthouse, staring at the skyline with haunted eyes. I'm sorry, he said. For what? Kissing me? Or for the fact that your world is eating me alive? Before he could answer, his grandfather arrived unannounced, Cain tapping against marble floors. Robert Cain was 84, steel-spined, with eyes that missed nothing. So this is the girl destroying my legacy. Elena stiffened, but Alexander stepped between them. Grandfather, don't. Robert's gaze pinned Elena. What's your price? Excuse me? Everyone has one. Name yours and disappear. I'm not for sale. Robert's laugh was bitter. Everyone's for sale, girl. Some just cost more than others. He turned to Alexander. Victoria's family is threatening to pull their investment. If they do, we lose everything. 2,000 jobs gone. Your grandfather's life work dust. All because you couldn't keep your hands to yourself. I'm breaking the engagement. Alexander said, You'll do no such thing. It's not your decision. It became my decision when you started thinking with something other than your brain. Robert slammed his cane down. You will marry Victoria in 6 weeks, or I will sell the company to the highest bidder and let those 2,000 families fend for themselves. The words hit like a physical blow. Alexander's face went white. Robert left without another word. Elena found her voice. He's bluffing. He's not. Alexander's hand shook as he poured whiskey at 2 p.m. He built that company to give my grandmother security after she lost everything in the war. He'd burn it down rather than let me destroy what it represents. So what do? There is no we, Elena. There can't be. The words landed like shrapnel. Elena stepped back, betrayal written across her features. You're choosing her. I'm choosing 2,000 people who need their paychecks more than I need to be happy. That's noble. It's also a lie. Elena's voice turned sharp. You're choosing her because it's easier. Because fighting for something real terrifies you more than any boardroom ever could. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're just like Jason. Different tax bracket, same cowardice. That's not fair. Fair. Elena laughed, hollow and breaking. You made me believe. You kissed me like I mattered. And now you're throwing me away because the cost got too high. Alexander wanted to argue, to explain, to make her understand that sacrifice wasn't the same as cowardice. But the words died in his throat because maybe she was right. Maybe he was a coward. Elena grabbed her bag. I hope your merger makes you happy, Elena. Wait. She stopped at the door, her back to him. For what? More pretty lies about how you want me? Save them for someone who can afford to believe you. The door closed with devastating finality. Alexander stood alone in his gilded cage, whiskey burning his throat, wondering when he'd become the villain in his own story. His phone buzzed. Victoria. I saw the photos. Cute little rebellion, darling. But we both know how this ends, do we? You're going to marry me? You're going to smile for the cameras? And that girl is going to disappear back into whatever hole she crawled out of. Victoria's voice turned cold. I had my people dig into her background. One phone call, and every secret she's tried to bury goes public. Her father's gambling debts, her mother's hospitalization. The real reason she left her hometown? Leave her alone, then do what you're supposed to do. Be a good boy, Alexander. It's what you're best at. The line went dead. Alexander hurled his phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, glass and plastic raining onto imported marble. He'd thought he was protecting Elena by pushing her away. Instead, he'd just painted a target on her back. 3 days later, the stories hit. Elena's past splashed across tabloids, every painful detail weaponized for entertainment. Her father's debts. Her mother's breakdown. The scholarship she'd lost because Jason had sabotaged her final. Project Alexander saw the articles and Something inside him broke. He'd spent his life playing by rules written by people who saw humans as chess pieces. It was time to burn the board, he called his lawyers. Find every piece of dirt on the Ashford family. I don't care what it costs. Sir, if you're declaring war on them, you'll lose everything. I've already lost what matters. Then he did something he'd never done before. He went after Elena with no plan, no strategy, no calculation, just raw, desperate need to make things right. He found her in her tiny apartment, eyes red from crying, surrounded by newspapers screaming her secrets. Get out, she said.
Alexander.
I can't do this. I'm calling off the wedding. Elena looked up, hope and suspicion warring in her expression. Your grandfather can go to hell. The company can burn. I'm done sacrificing people I love for people I don't. You don't love me? You barely know me. Alexander knelt in front of her, taking her hands. I know you're brave. I know you're stubborn. I know you make me want to be someone better than the man I've become. And I know that if I let you walk away, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. They'll destroy you. Let them try. Elena's tears fell, hot and honest. This is insane. Probably we could lose everything. I already did. The moment you walked out, he pressed his forehead to hers. Fight with me, please. Elena kissed him, tasting salt and hope and reckless abandon. Okay, she whispered. Let's burn it all down. Neither of them knew that Victoria had one final card to play, and it would cost them more than either could imagine. The press conference was scheduled for noon. Alexander would announce the broken engagement, face the consequences, and dare the world to tear him apart. Elena stood beside him in his penthouse, wearing a dress he'd bought her that she'd initially refused until he'd said, "Let them see you're not ashamed." She wasn't. Not anymore. Alexander's phone rang at 11:30, his lawyer voice tight with panic. Don't go to that conference. It's too late to back out. Victoria just filed a lawsuit claiming breach of contract. She's suing for $500 million and demanding immediate foreclosure on the company assets as collateral. She has the legal right. Your grandfather signed over emergency powers 2 years ago in case you tried to back out. Alexander's world tilted. That's impossible. It gets worse. She's also leaked documents showing your company has been operating at a loss for 6 months. If this goes public, the stock crashes. Everyone loses their jobs tomorrow, not in 6 weeks. Elena watched Alexander's face drain of color. What's wrong? He lowered the phone slowly. Victoria's destroying the company if I don't marry her. And she's going to win. There has to be something we can do. There is. Alexander's voice went hollow. I marry her. I sign my life away. And everything goes back to normal? Except us. Except us. Lena felt her heart shatter. So we fought for nothing. No, we fought to know what it feels like to choose something real. He cupped her face, memorizing every detail. I'll remember you every day for the rest of my life. That's not enough. It has to be. The words hung between them, final as gravestones. Then Elena did something she'd never imagined she was capable of. What if I give her what she really wants? What are you talking about? Elena pulled out her phone, scrolling to the photos she'd been gathering for 3 days. Photos of Victoria with another man. Not just any man. Marcus Chen, Alexander's biggest competitor, the one who'd been trying to buy out Cain Industries for years. I hired a private investigator, Elena said quietly. Victoria isn't in love with you. She's in love with him. But her family won't let her marry someone self-made, someone without a pedigree. So she's using your name to secure her inheritance? Then planning to push you out and install Marcus as CEO? It's a hostile takeover disguised as a wedding. Alexander stared at the photos, his mind racing. Where did you get the money for an investigator? Elena's silence spoke volumes. Elena, what did you do? I sold my mother's ring. The only thing I had left of her. Her voice cracked. I couldn't let Victoria win. Not like this. Alexander pulled her into his arms. This woman who'd sacrificed her last precious thing to save him. You're extraordinary. I'm terrified. If this doesn't work, I have nothing left. We make it work. They brought the evidence to Victoria at 11:50. 10 minutes before the press conference, she sat in a conference room, perfectly composed. Until Alexander slid the photos across the table, her mask cracked. "You've been planning to destroy me from the beginning," Alexander said. "But here's the problem. If these photos go public, your family disowns you. Marcus won't marry someone without money, and you lose everything." Victoria's hands trembled. "What do you want?" "Call off the lawsuit. Release the company, disappear, and if I don't, then I burn us both down, and we see who crawls out of the ashes." Victoria looked between them, her perfect facade crumbling. For a moment, Elena almost felt sorry for her. She was trapped in the same cage Alexander had been, sacrificing love for duty, drowning in expectations. "I loved him first, you know," Victoria said quietly. "Marcus. Before my family decided Alexander Cain was a better investment, they took everything from me. I was just trying to take something back. By destroying innocent people," Elena said. "Innocent?" Victoria laughed bitterly. "There's no such thing in our world. Only survivors and casualties." "Then survive somewhere else," Alexander said. Victoria stood, gathering her things with shaking hands. "You'll regret this. Both of you, probably," Alexander said. "But we'll regret it together." Victoria left without another word. At noon, Alexander stood before cameras and announced the engagement was over. The reporters screamed questions. The stock wavered. The board panicked. But Alexander stood beside Elena, her hand in his, and told the truth. "I'm building something new. Something that doesn't require me to sell my soul for stability. And if that means starting over, so be it." The press devoured it. Some called him brave. Others called him a fool. Elena called him hers. That night, in his penthouse overlooking the city, Alexander held Elena while she cried for the ring she'd sold, for the mother she'd lost, for the price she'd paid to save someone she barely knew. "I'll buy you 1,000 rings," he whispered. "I don't want rings. I want you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me this matters. Promise me I didn't give up the last piece of my mother for a man who's going to wake up one day and realize I'm not worth the cost." Alexander tilted her face up, his eyes fierce. "You're worth everything. The company, the money, the name. All of it means nothing without you. Can't know that. We barely know each other. I know enough. I know you're the bravest person I've ever met. I know you make me want to be someone worthy of you. And I know that I'd rather have 1 year with you than a lifetime without." Elena kissed him, tasting salt and promise and fragile hope. But as they fell asleep tangled together, neither of them saw the email that arrived at 2 a.m. from Robert Cain. "You think you've won? But every empire falls. I'll make sure yours falls hardest." The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. 6 months later, Elena stood in the ruins of Alexander's grandfather's company, watching movers box up decades of history. Robert Cain had made good on his threat. He'd called in debts, manipulated boards, turned allies into enemies. The company had collapsed in slow motion, taking 2,000 jobs with it. Alexander had tried everything. He'd liquidated assets, begged investors, worked 20-hour days trying to save what his grandfather had built. It hadn't been enough. Now he sat in the empty boardroom, head in his hands, the weight of failure crushing him. Elena sat beside him. "Talk to me. I destroyed everything he built. Everything that mattered. He didn't destroy it. He did, because I chose you over his legacy." The words hung heavy between them. Elena's worst fear, spoken aloud. That she was the poison that had killed his world. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. Alexander looked at her, and his eyes held something she didn't expect. Not regret. Not anger. Peace. No, never. "Alexander, you lost everything. I lost a company. I found something worth more." Took her hand. "These 6 months with you have been the most honest of my life. No masks, no performance. Just me and you and whatever we're building together. We're building it on ashes, and we'll make something beautiful from the ashes." The door opened. Robert Cain entered, older than Elena remembered, his cane tapping slower. "Came to gloat?" Alexander asked, his voice flat, came to apologize. The words shocked them both into silence. Robert lowered himself into a chair, wincing. I spent my life believing legacy was everything. That family name, company reputation, the empire we built, mattered more than the people inside it. He looked at Alexander. I was wrong. You destroyed the company to teach me that. I destroyed it because I'm a stubborn old fool who couldn't admit he was terrified. Robert's hand shook on his cane. Terrified that if you chose love over duty, you'd prove I wasted my life choosing duty over love. Your grandmother begged me to retire, to travel, to live before we ran out of time. I said the company needed me. She died waiting for me to choose her. Tears streaked down the old man's face. I wanted you to make a different choice, Robert continued. So I made it impossible for you to choose the company. I thought if I took it away, you'd finally be free of the cage I built for myself. He turned to Elena. I'm sorry for how I treated you. You're not destroying anything. You're saving him from becoming me. Elena's throat tightened. The jobs, though, those people, are being hired by someone who believes in second chances. Robert slid papers across the table. Marcus Chen bought the company assets. He's keeping everyone employed and honoring their contracts. It's not perfect, but it's survival. Alexander stared at the papers. Marcus? Victoria's Marcus? Turns out when Victoria's family disowned her, she and Marcus eloped. Built a life on their terms. She asked him to save the jobs as a wedding gift. Said she owed you that much. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Robert stood slowly. I'm moving to the coast. Going to watch sunsets like your grandmother always wanted? Maybe it's too late, but maybe late is better than never. Placed a hand on Alexander's shoulder. Be happy, boy. That's the only legacy that matters. After he left, Elena and Alexander sat in the silence of the empty room. What do we do now? She asked. Alexander pulled her close. We start over, Empire. No expectations. Just us. I'm still nobody with a second-hand sweater. You're Elena Hart. The woman who asked a stranger to save her and ended up saving him instead. You're brave and stubborn, and you make terrible coffee. And you're everything. Elena laughed through tears. Your coffee is worse. Then we're perfectly matched. They walked out of the building hand in hand, leaving behind the ghosts of empires and expectations. A year later, Elena stood in a small classroom, teaching literature to kids who reminded her of herself. Hungry for stories that proved ordinary people could be extraordinary. Alexander walked in during her break, carrying coffee he'd finally learned to make properly. How's the new venture? She asked. Good investors love the sustainable airline model. Turns out, starting from scratch lets you build something ethical for once. He kissed her forehead. Your mother would be proud, you know? You used her ring to save someone. That's love in action. Elena touched the simple silver band on her finger, the replacement ring Alexander had given her. Not expensive, just meaningful. I think she'd like you, Elena said. Even though I'm responsible for your tabloid phase? Especially because of that. She always said life's too short for boring stories. They laughed, the sound echoing in the empty classroom. Outside, rain pattered against windows. The city hummed with possibility. Somewhere Robert watched sunsets and talked to his late wife's photograph. Somewhere, Victoria and Marcus built an empire on their own terms. And here, in this small classroom with scratched desks and flickering lights, two broken people had found something more valuable than any inheritance. They'd found each other. Alexander pulled Elena close. No regrets? She kissed him, soft and sure. Not a single one. Even when I burned the dinner tonight. Especially then. They walked into the rain together, no umbrella, no plan, no certainty beyond the fact that whatever came next, they'd face it side by side. Some fairy tales started in airports with desperate whispers. Some ended in classrooms with coffee and laughter. This one was just beginning. The end.